All right, you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to the Spiritual Forum, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Oh, what am I going to tell you to do today? I guess I want to remind you to share this podcast with your friends and family and get the word out that it's a really interesting conversation about spiritual living and all sorts of different topics. And if you want to receive a newsletter from me, you should get on thespiritualforum.org and go ahead and click subscribe and and you'll be getting a regular newsletter every time a podcast episode comes out. So that's all I have for introductory comments. I want to introduce you to my wonderful guest today, Padma Menon. She's a dancer and a philosopher. Padma is a pioneer in reviving the ancient practice of dance contemplation. She helps people seeking to reclaim their sacred selves by generously sharing her lifetime knowledge of sacred Indian dance, philosophy, and ritual so that people can experience unconditional freedom, taste their true essence, and move in this world in a sacred way. Padma is also the founder of Moving Archetypes. That's her website. And Moving Archetypes is dedicated to revitalizing the ancient and alchemical practice of dance contemplation. And it looks like the tagline that's on your website is ancient goddess wisdom practiced through Indian dance. I just love all of that. And I got most of that from your website. So I just want to first welcome you, Padma, for coming on today and really look forward to talking with you.
I'm so honored to be here, Reverend Carol. I've been listening to some of your podcasts, and I love the way in which you hold space, what you bring to it, the way in which what you say is both emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and the kind of people that you have on. So I'm really honored to be here. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And I appreciate your listening. I think it also gives you an idea of what's going to happen today. So I really would like to just start by allowing you to tell your story about dance, your spiritual story, or whatever got to you to where you are today.
I was born and raised in India and lived for my first 21 years in India. I started dancing at a very early age. In fact, I was known as what's called a child prodigy. So I started performing at the age of 9. The reason I say that is dance came to me even before I was aware of what it was. It was something that was, I call it my mother tongue, because it's something that was there. In fact, it's more essential to me than spoken language. Dance is something that is deeper than verbal and spoken languages, including my own Indian mother tongue language of Malayalam. I was also fortunate to be with a teacher who was a master in an ancient lineage. He was the 10th generation dancer in his family. And he brought a very, I would say, a magical dimension to the dance, because he really embodied to me how dance could be something that is ancient, something that connects us across time and space. And not that I knew about all this when I was very young, but I sensed something other in his dance. And I can say that really the rest of my life was spent exploring what is this other dimension of dance that I sensed but didn't quite know at the time I was very young. So I had a beautiful performing career, but I realized very early on that I didn't just want to be performing again and again, the spectacle, no matter how successful it was, and I really was honored with the success, but I just felt that there was something missing in just the performing. I came to Australia also when I was very young, 21, 22. I was in an arranged marriage, which didn't work out. And so here I was in a different country where I had never expected to be. And the dancing took on a different role. It became much more marginalized and exotic, whereas in India I was a mainstream performer. And that brought a very different consciousness about what is it that I'm doing? Why do I do this? What is the place of dance in this culture that I'm in now, in this land that I'm in now. And that's been my quest, is what makes this dance spiritual? Is it the story? Is it the movement? What is the spiritual dimension of dance? And I lived in the Netherlands for a long time. I was working as a choreographer, but every stage of my journey was a deepening about this quest of really getting a sense of what is this kind of dance. What do we mean by dance as a ritual? What do we mean by dance that is about consciousness, about transformation? And I can say that it's probably in the last 10 years that I've come to a certain space where I feel, oh, I can see this constellation now. I can see what makes up this constellation that I call dance contemplation. What kind of body do we need? What is the state of being? What is the intention that we bring into it? What is the nature of the physicality? Because not all dance is contemplative dance, and it needn't be. Dance can be for many different reasons, and all of it is beautiful. But when dance is an inquiry, a spiritual inquiry, a contemplation, it has a particular physicality. It's a particular kind of language. So that's what I do now. Is I'm very committed and passionate about sharing this practice, and I call it also, I'm increasingly beginning to call it body-led spirituality, because I feel like over the centuries across the world, in so many domains, we have rejected the body. We speak of transcending body. We speak of being out of the body. It's like the value is all about being out of the body. And yet, I think it's so important to tether spirituality and our life in the material side of our body, because it is through our body that we connect to earth, connect to nature. And I feel like it's the disconnection with the body that's at the foundation of the way in which we experience our disconnection with earth, with each other, especially in the times we live in. So this body-led spiritual inquiry has really become a passion for me.
So interesting. I want to capitalize on a couple points there. First of all, the way you describe your childhood is interesting. It's almost like you came in as a soul that, it's almost like you came into the planet like movement, that you knew this was your life passion in some way, even as a young child. Like, I think that's just so interesting. And I think some of us have a sense of spirituality, or that we have a sense of something beyond us as a child, or we have a connection to nature. But this idea that dance or movement of the body was closer to you than language is really fascinating.
Yes, Reverend Carol, it was an interesting thing, because from my teacher said to me, he said to me once, he said, dance is something that you've inherited, he told me. And he wasn't meaning inherited from him. He said, it's something that's come to you and you don't own it. So that was a sense of, don't feel like this is my talent and, I own this. So he said, you just have a responsibility to do it. And you do have a responsibility to do it because it's come to you. And those words have really stayed with me. And I know that there are times in my life I've struggled with it. I've actually left dancing for years. And I have felt that I have been rendered without speech. And I remember that after there was a period in my life where I didn't dance, and I went and did lots of other things. I ran not-for-profit organizations, and it was a valuable experience of being in the world. And I was raising 2 children as a single mother. But, and I remember sitting in a counselor's room, and I hadn't spoken about dance. I hadn't seen dance for a while. And I started speaking to her, and she said to me, what's missing? What do you feel is missing? And I said, I feel like I don't have speech. And I just burst into tears. I said,
Wow.
without the dancing, I feel I am invisible in not in the sense of being out in the spectacle, but I feel like I'm not speaking. I'm dumb without the dance.
Yeah,
And that's when I realized.
go ahead. That's when you
And
realize.
that's when I realized that it's something other. It's something, yeah, as you said, it's something that comes to you through time, across time and space. And I feel like the reason why so many ancient cultures dance was the primary spiritual expression is because there's something in dance that absolutely transcends time and space. In dance as ritual, it can really connect you. It's like you're dancing in the bodies of these women who were dancing, thousands of years ago. You
It's
really
like
feel that
it's
immediacy.
yeah, it sounds like the dance exists and you're opening yourself up to express the dance.
Yes, exactly,
Yeah, which is a
exactly.
lot different than the mechanistic way of learning certain positions or learning certain ways to dance. This is like, oh, it sounds like it's just like opening yourself up fully to the
Yes,
dance. Like the dance
yes,
is spirit.
yes. The dance, it's like yeah, absolutely beautifully put. I can't put it any better. It is like you receive it.
Yeah.
And in the dance practice, that's what it's called. It's called, the first state of being you bring in is called yajna, and that yajna means an offering. So
Oh,
you offer, and the dance is an offering, and you meet that. Your body meets that when you come with a state of offering, which is without self-interest and without a sense of past and time, without sense of mastery, wanting to learn it as a technique, being instrumental about it. If you just receive it, it comes to you.
that's beautiful. Now, the years that you didn't dance, was that really just because you got caught up in raising kids and making money and that kind of thing, or was it a conscious decision to put that aside for some time?
Um, I think it was a bit of both, but there was also my sense that I was pushing the boundaries of dance. I was pushing the boundaries of dance to find out, how is this a philosophical inquiry? How is this a spiritual inquiry? And I feel like I reached the limits of it as dance, as we normally do, as a performance. And while I say that, like I said, there's nothing wrong. I think multiplicity is wonderful. That I'd rather that people dance than not dance. Any dance is better than no dancing. So all sorts of dance is fine. But for me, that dance an inquiry, a spiritual inquiry, a philosophical inquiry, I felt like I had reached the limits. And then I went into this time in my life where I was really studying philosophy from traditional teachers in India, which is more like an inquiry. So it's not as an academic study, not as an analytical study, but very much as a lived inquiry. So I had this long dialogue for many years with traditional teachers exploring philosophy, particularly the body-led traditions, or at least traditions that were centered around the body. And so during that time, I was also raising two children, and there was a way I needed to make a living, but it also allowed me, like I said, to be out in the real world and to explore other work and how other people lived and what was important to them. And I think that was a beautifully valuable experience for me. Also raising children. What is it to be in that family situation? Because again, I feel like we think spirituality is somehow separate from all that. And
Hmm.
yet some of the seminal traditions of India, including the Bhagavad Gita, is about being in the world, right in the middle of the battle. And how is spirituality a lived, um, acting, moving, sensory experience? Because that's what real life is. We live in our bodies, we are sensory beings, we have to act, we have to do things. And how does all of that become spiritual? And so that was a beautiful time, even though it was difficult. It was also a very beautiful time to not be this artist anymore and to be out there doing work like everyone else, bringing up children, and going through those experiences of being a woman.
You probably also got a sense of the kinds of people who would come to you to learn dance.
Yes, Yes. And when I work with women, which I do in my individual program, and in my group programs, yeah, their experiences resonate with me. The experience of being a mother, of working, of being a single mother, a wife, it resonates with me. I know what it is to live in the world in those roles.
Yeah, I think this conversation is so important, because when you look at like Western spirituality, there's a lot of detachment from the body, like you mentioned. There's a lot of things like reading or sitting and praying or even, meditating. And there's it's not like you're out of the body doing that, but you're certainly not in movement, and you're not and actually when the body moves is when you're really conscious of it. Like I did, you mentioned about listening to the whole body prayer podcast or YouTube video before you came on. And I've been doing that practice, his whole body prayer. And what's interesting about that is I when I'm finished with it, I feel my body. It's interesting. It's like I'm doing it for 5 or 10 minutes, and I am feeling my body, but then it's like suddenly it feels like all my awareness is in my body. And then I take a walk, and I take a walk out on in nature, and all of the trees and everything just feels different because I think my awareness is in my body. But my awareness is not in my body when I'm doing so many other classical spiritual things. And so that's why I'm so intrigued by this conversation about dance. I think, like you said, I think we see these they're maybe pictographs, but how people would like the dance around the fire. The tribal people would dance, and I think they would communicate through dance, like they'd tell their stories through dance. And we've gotten so verbal, we've gotten so in our heads that it's almost like our heads are chopped off. So this is why I'm so intrigued about the work that you're doing, and how you're helping people. I mean, I know you may have a different theology. It doesn't really matter. I think God shows up in lots of different ways, the divine, but you're experiencing the divine, but you're expressing the divine through this uh, activity. I don't even think I'd call it a modality, this activity. So let's talk about dance contemplation and the archetypes. Oh gosh, there's so many things I want to talk about. And how you teach people, or what you do when what do you do? I mean, you not as a performer, what do you do to help people embrace this?
There's so many things about your reflection there, Reverend Carol, which go to the heart of the practice and the heart of why I do this. Um, so with dance contemplation, I call it a constellation because there are many dimensions to it. So when you mentioned the theology, uh, it's interesting because the reason why I call it archetypes is also to open it up a bit to this mental, away from the mental way in which we gather something and we make it into a closed system.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think of deities, when we think of systems, when we think of philosophies, the mind is a way of making everything known. And the way we make everything known is also, we just limit it. When we speak of mastery, it's a finite thing. We always want to get something and just kind of get to know it, and that's it. Let's move on to the next thing. But an experience is infinite because reality is infinite. The body is infinite. So what I have found over years of practice, and also through studying a lot of these ancient traditions, and this is not just in India, but there is this intelligence about what is the mental consciousness and what is a body-led consciousness. And they are slightly different things because the mind exists in time. In fact, the mind isn't there without time. The paradigm of time is what really gives rise to the mind. And so the mind's lenses are linear. We look at the past, present, future. We have duality. So the mind is always about separating, labeling, fragmenting, differentiating. And that is a very useful intelligence to
Mm-hmm.
have. However, it's not a very useful intelligence in terms of for us to experience all of reality, because reality isn't only linear and in duality. And this is where this body-led consciousness, the lenses of the body are very different to the lenses of the mind. So the lenses of the body are things like movement, weight, shape, space, form. So this is how the bodies and senses. The senses are a very important aspect of the body's intelligence. And when we think that the body is completely road-mapped by the mind, so even in the traditions that say that they're using their bodies, they are actually using the body to follow a template or roadmap of the mind. Again, nothing wrong with that. But and even dance can be like that. A lot of the dance is we choreograph something, or we have a set kind of template which we then manifest in the body, or the body follows. But in this tradition, there is a very different relationship between form and how we encounter that form. And this is that yajna state. When we come in with that, the state of yajna, in fact, dance itself is called a yajna. So the whole of the practice is really about us learning or opening ourselves up to be free of time, to be to allow the movement to emerge from the dynamics of the body, from our weight, from connecting that weight. So when I say weight, I use it in a very particular way here. I mean, all our bodies have weight, and movement is, weight is an important component of movement, just like shape is, or just like how we use that weight. Are we using it with a certain force? Are we using it lightly? So that's what I mean by weight. And the weight connecting us to the earth, to the gravity of the earth, the attachment to the earth. It's a very simple thing, but it's completely transformative. It really brings a very different intelligence. It awakens an intelligence in the body, which is far more expansive than a mind-led intelligence. And the thing about the body-led intelligence is that there is no hierarchy. So while I say body-led, I say that to distinguish it from the way in which we live now, which is mind-led. But when we are leading with the body, the mind and the body, they have an equal space. The mind finds its rightful movement within that larger intelligence. And absolutely, when I do this with the women, they speak of the things that you just shared with me. They tell me how it changes how they experience nature, particularly. Many of them say to me, suddenly, it's like the cosmic becomes intimate. The trees, it's like everything is vibrating with something more intense and more alive. And we become much more alive in our senses. We've got this gift of senses, and yet for centuries, traditions tell us it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing to enjoy beauty. And we feel so guilty about our desire, about our beauty, and about enjoyment. And I think what happens with this disconnection with enjoyment is that it becomes something about consumption, about accumulation, because the desire never goes away. It just becomes something projected out from us. Whereas it can be, if we learn to accept enjoyment, it's very simple. It's just a walk outside. It's looking at the tree, the bird song. We don't have to go for that most expensive holiday somewhere or buy that most expensive thing. So I feel like our inability to inquire into things that make us human, things that make us living beings, have led us to this kind of warped manifestations of all these attributes.
Yeah, I mean, you're covering, it almost sounds like the solution to all of our problems. The disconnection from each other, the disconnection from ourselves, the disconnection from our body, the disconnection from the earth body, the complete, we're just in such kind of disconnected relationship with animals and creatures and insects and everything, all of life. we look at them as something and we don't really enjoy it. And and maybe we all just need to dance.
Well, that's my solution.
I love this. Maybe we all just use a dance. Like instead of like starting something with a prayer, or starting school with a pledge or announcements, we just start with dance. I mean, what would think about how life would be if we add this like part, like an integrated part of our life. Like we didn't learn to dance. Like I had 3 daughters, and and I lived in Texas at the time, but I took them all to, do you want to do ballet or tap? This is a Western dance. And except for my youngest did belly dancing. And I did belly dancing too, which was a little more, I think, in the body than these others. But it's something that it's so weird. It's like on a checklist on the Western moms list, are you interested in dance? Are you interested in, softball? Are you interested in this? But it's like this is just like a natural, like if you came in with this complete fullness of knowing that dance is something that's going to come through you. Maybe all of us have that, but we've kind of cut it off, maybe our culture's not encouraging that. And so when we start to move, it's kind of like, stop behaving that way versus, oh, keep moving. But this just really seems like a
Yeah.
great thing that we could really start early on and make as a regular practice.
Yeah, and I think people are intimidated by dance. I know that
Yeah.
sometimes women come to me and say to me, you know, what intimidated me was the word dance. If you didn't use the word dance, I
Okay.
would have come to this much earlier. And
Yeah,
so
I
this
get
has been
that.
interesting.
Like I'm not good
Yeah.
about dance. I'm not a dancer. I could
Yes.
see people would
Yeah.
say that right off the bat.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I have an interesting story that I was doing a workshop in Melbourne once, and there was a group of people there, and one of them was a male academic, and he was sitting out there, and when we started, I said to him, "Well, aren't you going to join us?" And he was outraged. He said, "Oh no, I just came here to watch it. I wouldn't dance." And it was like, but I'm an academic. I'm not the dancing is seen as something that is very much lower down. The valued, or the kind of, the intellect is important, and dance is something that is not of that caliber of intelligence. And yet dance, the intelligence of dance is something other, but it is an intelligence. It's an absolutely a particular kind of intelligence. And I know that when I work with women, they actually say how that intelligence really brings them into an archetypal insight into reality, into things that are happening around them. And they say, they can almost sense a pattern in reality as a movement. And
Oh.
this pattern intelligence, which is what dance was about, which is what archetypal traditions were always firstly embodied traditions. And what has happened is we've separated archetypal traditions from their ritual. Ritual is always embodied. And now they become stories. And when they become stories, they lose the infinite possibilities
Right.
that these
Their stories
traditions.
are in your head. They're like a head
Yes,
experience. Yeah.
yeah, and they're linear. and
Yes.
they're linear. And and so this pattern intelligence, which is very subtle, it's a really subtle intelligence. And when you start attending to it, it's this kind of practice, this sort of body-led inquiry, that really helps you to start sensing this kind of intelligence in things that are happening around you. And it is a really powerful but very subtle, a subtle sort of intelligence. It's subtle and powerful. And this is the whole paradox again, which, as you know, is very much part of archetypal traditions, is the paradox, which also gets us out of this dualistic way of thinking. How can the subtle be powerful? And yet it's subtle and very powerful, more powerful than things that scream at us.
Right.
And this way of sensing reality as multidimensional experience, and I feel that what this tradition gives to people, and this is what I hear, this is what I experience, is that ability to hold multidimensionality, that complexity. And I know I've been listening to philosophers and thinkers, especially in recent times, where they have been saying that what we're struggling with is our increasing inability to handle complexity. The more we go into social media, and the more we go into these online channels as our main source of communication and interaction, we are really losing complexity. We try to make everything into very simple things of yes and no, and do you agree or not agree? And that loss of multidimensionality is also our disconnection, because reality, nature, is extremely complex, multidimensional, subtle. And I feel that that's where we are so disconnected with the movement of reality, nature, our own body. Our body is multidimensional.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fragile, powerful, subtle, multidimensional site. And the interesting thing, Reverend Carol, is that the ancient Sanskrit word for body is kshetra. In fact, I'm doing my current group courses is about the kshetra body. What does it mean? And the word kshetra also means earth.
Mm.
It also means the cosmos. So it is any site of manifestation is kshetra. So the invitation was to experience body itself as the earth, that the earth isn't separate, that you don't have a relationship to earth, but
Right.
you are
You
the
are the
earth.
earth. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's this is a material experience. It's not a thought.
Right. Yeah. Which I'm thinking another thing that we're trying to do, like when you talk about how we're trying to handle complexity. You know, we try to name things and put them in
Mhm.
boxes. I think we have a need to control. So we have a
Yes.
need to control reality. We have a
Mhm.
need to control data. And that's what's going on with all of the social media and everything that they're trying to do to get condense me down to some sort of consumer who has these interests and this situation and that, and it's all labeled. And the reality is they'll never be able to do that because
Mhm.
we are very complex, interesting, unpredictable beings. and
Yes.
and that's what I think. I'm thinking about the academic who said, well, I'm an academic, why would I dance? I'm thinking, and I don't know him, and I'm presuming, and I know that it's I should not be making assumption about him, but I'm wondering if he's feeling like I lose control in dance.
Mhm.
And so therefore I can control everything as an observer, but moving in this space called dance, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's very, very frightening to a lot of people, I think.
Yes, yes, I absolutely think that you're right, Reverend Carol. And I don't judge that. So when I was
Mhm.
sharing that story, it was more to speak about the value that we hold for dance, and that's not just him. All
Mhm.
of us have that value. It's, he's just an example, but I've heard that time and time again. I've heard that from even when I was a young child in India. My not my own family, but a lot of my relatives used to say, why is she dancing? She's so clever, she should be going to university and doing something.
Right.
And I did go to university, but why does she want to choose dance as her life? So there is this sense that if you're clever and intelligent, you're not going to be a dancer. That it is
Yes.
really for
Yeah.
those people who are intellectually not bright, that they will dance, which
Yeah,
is
I get
so
that.
far from the truth.
I get that. I get all of that. Yeah. It is that's
Yeah,
a yeah.
yeah. And the control thing is absolutely really at the center of this. The body, I think we're afraid of the body because the body brings us to a certain truth. The body brings us to the material truth about our existence, that we live and we die in the body. The body is changing, the body sometimes gets sick, and the body dies. And we have this terror. It's like the body brings us to the reality that we are not immortal. I mean, sometimes I meet people who say to me, yeah, I'm okay with dying. And I sense that's a thought. But,
Mhm. Mhm.
dying as this material experience of the body starting to change, starting to be what we think of as less strong, or because we are, of course, always comparing it to what we were, rather than thinking of each moment of that change as the moment of reality, and what is the multidimensionality of each change. And I think, I can't remember where I read it, but I was reading somewhere in our discourses on aging, we're constantly comparing ourselves to the 20-year-old body or the 20-year-old intelligence.
Yeah,
And we
it's
say
everywhere.
this is a degradation or a decline. But in many ancient traditions, that was the age of coming into a certain wisdom, a certain spiritual maturity and intelligence that, in fact, we gain, we are enriched, rather than looking at perhaps what we don't have anymore is what we don't need anymore. But we have this other multidimensional present that we totally ignore because we're constantly living in the past. But all of these things are about that we have a story that gives us a certain a fantasy, I would say, of knowing that we know reality, that we have defined reality, we have categorized, we are masters of reality. And if we are not, if there's something that we don't know, we will know it. And sometimes I say that, are you okay with the unknowable? Can reality always be unknowable? And there is an intelligence. So when ancient traditions speak about mystery, it wasn't that we need to go and solve the mystery. And it also wasn't that you were stupid because you didn't solve it, but that there is an intelligence and a ferocity that is required to live in mystery. And many of these ancient goddesses were ferocious. They were warrior goddesses, not because they espoused war and violence, but it was because you need that ferocity. Just like nature's ferocious, we have thunderstorms and volcanoes. There is ferocity in nature and there is ferocity in us. And that is something, again, I feel like spiritual traditions have washed us out of our ferocity.
Yeah, we've been
But
tamed.
without ferocity, yes, we've been tamed, but we need ferocity to be present. We need ferocity to accept this life, this precious gift of life that we have, that, we will die one day, that these things, our bodies are what they are. It requires ferocity to actually accept the material basis of our life, which is our body, our earth, the beauty of that, but also the fragility. And all of that is what is the intelligence of reality. So I think the ferocity in this practice, and the practice does have ferocity, that's what supports the loss of control, where we feel like we can't control it. And there is this unknowable dimension that is always going to remain unknowable because it's
Yeah.
infinite.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So I'm guessing that through our social indoctrination and taming, that ferocity is still there, though. It's like it's hidden. It's in the basement of our psyche or our soul. So it comes out probably in very, very strange ways when it comes out. But dance allows it to be expressed naturally, I would think, in the way it's like meant to be expressed through the body. But without that, then there's all this misbehavior that we do, and this kind of maybe war, maybe maybe it's just attacking people and all the things that we do. It's kind of a misplaced way of using our ferocity, which is a natural part of our being because we're part of the earth. Our body has that, and it's dance is where we're like are designed to express ourselves in that way. Um,
Yes, yes, absolutely, and beautifully put, Reverend Carol. And it's that ferocity that underpins also things like passion, because when you
yeah,
come into these ritual dimensions or archetypal dimensions, everything is connected to everything else. I have a woman who in my individual program, who beautifully put it. She said the greatest teaching of the practice for her was how there was this completely unexpected joining the dots that happen at a sensation level. So how does ferocity connect to passion? How does ferocity connect to desire? How does ferocity connect to fear? In fact, fear and fearsomeness, there is a flow between all this. They are not discrete emotions that are compartmentalized, but at a sensation level, they are all interconnected. and they're multidimensional. So when you are in one sensation, all the other sensations are also available to you. It's not to say that you should not feel fear, and there is an opposite of fear. But along with fear, it's like a lion or an animal that's attacked. When it's fearful, it's also at its most fearsome. So there
Uh-huh.
is this flow between all these different sensations. And so much of the dance practice is actually about connecting to the essence of nature as creeper, as tree, as animals. And it's not imitating them, but there's something about the intelligence of the practice that connects us to through the essence of the animal consciousness. Um, and the essence is movement. It is how they connect to the earth with their bodies. So, for example, there's a practice called Chatushpada, which literally means four-footed, but it also, the same word also means the four dimensions of consciousness. So there is something about connecting to 4 points of weight through the body that also brings us into that four-dimensional experience of consciousness, which normally we are always two-footed or dual in our
Yeah.
consciousness, me and somebody else, I and something else, or good and bad and right and wrong. But there is something here that's not a literal imitation. So we don't literally imitate the animals, but we invoke that the way in the dynamic of movement in the body in this four-footed way, which completely awakens teaching from the body. So the body teaches us. It's not the mind teaching us. The body teaches us about sensation. The mind cannot teach us about sensation because the mind has divided the sensations into emotions and feelings and given those stories and given them, good and bad values. So we're never going to be experience that the infinity and the fullness and the multidimensionality of sensation except through the body. Just like nature is multidimensional, the animals are multidimensional, and there's so much teaching that's available to us through the body, through nature, through animals. And one of the most moving things in this practice, Reverend Carol, is that if there is at all a relationship that we have, it's of teaching. So everything teaches us, and we teach. When we are open to that teaching relationship, then we also teach all other forms of nature, and we receive teaching from every little flower that opens, there is a teaching of the scorpion that we do in dance, a really profound teaching of the scorpion. And as we know, the scorpion is a very ancient symbol across, you'll find it in Egyptian culture, you find it on the pillars of Göbekli Tepe, at the 12,000-year-old temple that's been discovered in Turkey. You find it in India, and there is a very profound practice of the scorpion or a teaching of the scorpion. So the most humblest things in nature teach us, and we are part of nature when we also teach, when we are taught and we teach. And that's that beautiful relationship with nature that we don't stand outside nature. We are not masters of nature, and we do so at great peril to ourselves,
Hmm.
firstly to ourselves.
So I'm just guessing everybody who's listening to this is like, I want some of that. What what do you do? I mean, you're in Australia. So
Yes.
I'm sure you have you're teaching people who are there. What do you have a way to teach people who are not there?
So all my offerings are online, Reverend Carol.
Hmm.
I do group classes, which are which are so the group classes are live online, and I have people from all over Australia. I do have people from different parts of the world as well, when they can fit themselves into the Australian time. But I also offer the individual program, which can be done at people's convenience, because it's where I practice with women one-on-one for 6 months, and they choose a deity or a goddess because I feel like the goddess calls to them. It's that archetypal dimension of reality, nature, that's connecting to where we are in our own consciousness. So I invoke that goddess with them. I accompany them in their practice. And that's a 6-month program that's available to anyone. And in fact, I do have women from all over the world practicing with me through that program. I'm absolutely honored to meet some of those wonderful women. And I also do weekly practices through my Facebook and YouTube channels. So that's a really easy way. It's like if you just want to get a taste of what it is and what's the philosophy, some really simple practices, that's a great way of dipping your toes in and checking out if this is something for you. People are also welcome to subscribe to my newsletter where I share whenever offerings come up. I am planning to put more courses online. So that's something I'm working on at the moment. So fully online courses where there is no live component. So there are a few different ways in which people can uh, do this practice.
I mean, I think that, I mean, right off the bat, I'm thinking, okay, how would you do a dance? So this is for my this is my Western thinking. How would you do a dance class online? But it's not a dance class, and it's not like you're critiquing anyone's movement, but it feels like it's something that we would do together. But I guess that's not right thinking. So how does it work? Like I would
It is.
watch a video and then I would kind of just be inspired and move. It would be something like that.
Yes, so when we are, I mean, when we are in group classes,
Mm-hmm.
it's the invitation is always to encounter the form where you are,
Mm-hmm.
and to so there is no mastery. It's not about getting the technique perfect. It's
Yeah.
not about learning a piece of choreography.
Right.
Yeah, it's and it is sometimes it depends. Some practices. Just the other day, one of the women in my individual program, we were practicing. Uh, what is it to hold desire, enjoyment? Because that's something women have really been, it's become very problematic for women. And I don't mean the way in which, traditions like the way in which some of the traditions of Tantra practice today, where there is a kind of instrumentalization of that desire, but I'm speaking about it at a very primeval level, that enjoyment, that desire, that the sense of beauty, the sense of sensuality within us, outside us in nature, through scent, through seeing. So we were, so as a practice, what I did was I shared a little invocation of that sensation through my own body and my own movement. So that was just meant to inspire her. So my invitation to her was, look, during the week, just look at the video, see what it moves you to. And I said sometimes, if you feel like going outside and just moving after that video, see what comes to you. And if nothing comes to you, it's fine too. Because the thing about dance, and particularly in this tradition of rasa, is that what happened is that even when you watch it, so long as you come from that intention to actually but to be open to it, you do experience it. That sensation is enlivened in yourself. And of course, recent neuroscience studies have spoken about mirror neurons and how watching movement, if you're open to that, can actually, in your body, in your brain, it actually works as if you are dancing yourself. So there are, and it's like these ancient traditions already had the intelligence about the way in which dance can work in our consciousness and in our bodies, and it works on so many levels. So in some ways, the online work, I feel like it's completely suited to this
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't, it's across time and space,
Right.
and it brings women to an intimacy because they're in their homes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not being distracted by anything. It's their private space, their home, they're in their caves,
Yeah, I can
wherever
see
they
that.
are, and
Mhm.
there's this beautiful intimacy and privacy, which is really what this practice is about.
Yeah, it's not performing for anybody.
No, no.
Right. Right. So, oh, I was really kind of interested when you were talking about the program where a person will choose a deity, um, and I can't remember what else you said. Um, maybe an archetype. It doesn't matter. What would that be like? So, is it your what like what are the deities that you would choose from?
So I offer a bit of a short list, but
Okay.
uh, generally, if people come to me with a particular goddess, they're usually related, or they're usually connected to one of because the deities I have on the list are pretty much the kind of the seminal constellations. So Kali, the earth goddess Aditi, which is the nature. A lot of aspects of nature, dimensions of nature will come under that goddess. Rudra, who is generally understood as male, but Rudra is that invocation of that ferocity, that primeval storm energy. So Rudra is like the storm god. So there's Rudra, there's Saraswati, the goddess that is much more about aesthetics, about a much more intimate invocation of the feminine. So these are, and Kali, of course, is very popular because she's much more well known. And Kali, in fact, the ancestresses of Kali are some of the most ancient deities that are warrior goddesses. So it goes much more to that, to the way in which ferocity and sensuousness coexist in the same constellation, and a beautiful invocation, particularly for women in the times that we live in. And so when the goddess calls, so generally, it's interesting, Reverend Carol, that when women get in touch with me and say, I'm ready for the practice, often when the email comes, I have a flash about which deity they're going to
Oh,
bring. So we have a
interesting.
1 hour, we have a chat, which is a free chat I offer for women to explore. Is it right for them? So it's a no obligations chat, and I almost always, I have an inkling about which deity they're going to, which deity has called to them, and it's almost always the case that my intuition aligns with
Interesting. Yeah.
whoever's. Yes,
Yeah.
because that's what the space is. It's incredible, and this guidance continues. So when I practice with women, there is incredible guidance. It can be in the form of dreams. For example, one of the women I was practicing with, we were invoking Rudra, and there was this particular practice which is about the invocation of the bull, and it wasn't something that I had. It was front of mind. So there was this one night where I kept hearing the sound of the bull, the mooing of the bull, the bellowing of the bull, and I live in a fairly it's a city area. There is a lot of bush, as they say in Australia, very close to my house, which is why I love living where I live. But certainly no bulls around. And I woke up at night and I looked out of the window. I kept hearing this bellowing. And so then I woke up in the morning and I thought, the only thing is there's this practice. And I went to, so when I met the woman for the session, I did this practice. And she told me afterwards that that was exactly the practice she needed to move out of something that she was feeling a little bit constrained and blocked within her when she came to the practice. And she said the practice was exactly what she needed to move out of that sensation where she was. And there are so many stories like this. They're incredible. Sometimes it's a number plate, a car number plate. And
Oh,
so the guidance is, I mean, I feel like the divine has a great sense of humor.
I think so
Um,
too. That's
and
fascinating, though.
it is. So there's an intimacy, there's a lot of generosity, incredible compassion, because it's not about mastery, it's not about achieving goals, but it's really, when I say unconditional freedom, it is about freeing ourselves from purpose, goal, mastery, from accumulation, including spiritual accumulation. I'm always amused at the word spiritual mastery, because
Yeah.
I think what we want is, if a freedom should be unconditional to be free, because
Right.
if freedom is conditional upon getting to be masters of something, or a technical expertise, or having certain goals, that's not freedom. the unconditional freedom is freedom that is entirely from within yourself. It doesn't require you to depend on a teacher, on an external guru, on some sort of textbooks. It is learning to recognize how the intelligence, the divine guidance comes from within you. Your body is the source of your teaching. Your body is your guru. Your body is the divine. And when we learn to recognize that, that is unconditional freedom, which doesn't depend on anybody outside giving us permission. It doesn't depend on anything outside coming to us. It's available to us all the time. All we need to do is to turn towards it.
And that's part of the sense of humor of the divine, because we're always seeking and searching. And I don't think very few people have any idea what freedom is. We talk about it a lot, but we're so conditioned. We have no idea that so many of the things we do, the decisions we make, the activities we're in, just like what you're saying, having a purpose and goals and mastery, we're so conditioned to that. We have no idea what freedom is. And we're also so conditioned to respond to authority figures and government and corporations, and being, there's so many rules in our world, and we don't know how to live as free people. We don't even have a sense of what freedom is. So I love this idea that freedom is right there in your body. It's right there. It's with you all the time.
Yes, it is. And it's radical. I love the work of the philosopher J. Krishnamurti, and I often quote him. And he used the word radical. Freedom is radical.
Freedom is radical. Okay.
Yes, and a spiritual inquiry is radical. And it's radical because exactly because of what you said, the layers of, we don't realize how many layers of enslavement we have,
right,
until we start this inquiry. And when we say that freedom is located within us, the layers that we have to let go, that brings us into an awareness. And that is, again, what I hear women say all the time. Oh my God, I didn't realize how within me, it's not outside.
right.
Our enslavement doesn't begin, it's not outside, it's actually within us. The way in which our minds enslave the body, the way in which our minds enslave our infinity, the way in which our minds enslave eternity, it's within us. We don't have to go very far away to experience enslavement. And time and time again, this is what women say. They say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I was doing my own enslavement.
Right. Wow. So I have to ask you though, what about men? What could we do for men?
This is, there's, again, anything that's body led. And when I say goddess led, there was no hierarchy there. And I use these words because in order to kind of differentiate them from what we're doing now, which is mind-led, which is masculine traditions,
Right.
which are, when I say masculine, I mean mind-led. So we can be women and we can be living in very masculine paradigms, which we do, of course. The patriarchy simply means we're living in very mechanistic, mind-led paradigms. And I think this is important for men and for women in equal measure. It's important for all in equal measure because we all have bodies, and all our bodies are capable of that intelligence, and all our bodies are capable of reconnecting us with the earth, with nature. Where I'm offering now is where I think my experience is best suited. I do have men in my group programs, and one day I would like to open it up more, but I suppose I'm trying to do the best I can with the resources I have at the moment, with the experience that I have at the moment. But I have actually worked with men, and like I said, there are men sometimes in my group programs.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful. I mean, there's only so much of us that can go around. You've got your focus, but this isn't like an exclusive thing just for women. That's the point I wanted to make. The body movement and the dance, and I mean, because if you go back And you look at those ancient tribal times, it's not just the men sitting back watching the women dance around the fire. They were all dancing, they were all moving.
Yes.
And so it
Yes.
is something that is for everybody. And
Yes.
so it, and if nothing else, to just start recognizing how much we're in our minds, and how much how much we think freedom is having a purpose and goals and mastery. I think that's so funny that
Yes.
you brought that
Yes.
up. We think we're free when we have all these things named and accomplished, and then we'll be free. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. No, the first freedom we need is, again, to use the beautiful words of Jay Krishnamurti, freedom from the known. Freedom from the
oh,
known is the most radical freedom, and that means freedom from our mind. And that's not to say the mind is a bad thing or the villain, but the mind in its right place is a great thing. But right now, we've got the mind in a place where it's really not qualified to be. And I think that's the cause of our angst and our suffering at the
yeah.
moment, is that we're misusing the mind, and that's no fault of the mind. It's just we're using the mind where it doesn't really have the intelligence to help us. And
Right.
we do have something else that's always there with the intelligence to actually help integrate us, expand us, and reconnect us. But the other thing I do want to say, Reverend Carol, is uh, there was a very there was these traditions did have a role for women that was honored and acknowledged. It wasn't hierarchical, and this is the thing: is we find it difficult to do this without hierarchy, because we're living so much, either you are in front, or you're leading or you're following.
Mm.
But there is a way in which you're neither leading nor following. And there was a way in which these ancient traditions, the dance tradition in particular, did honor women as the teachers, women as those who facilitated this practice, who held the wisdom of the practice, and without dishonoring men or anyone else. And that is possible. And I know that there are people that are, archaeologists now and anthropologists who are speaking about societies which were completely non-hierarchical, but where women had an honored place. And in fact, it happens because women have that place of honor, that you can have something that is non-hierarchical. So that's important to acknowledge that, particularly in the times we live in, that there is something about the honoring of that wisdom and of women's place in that wisdom that is important to creating these non-hierarchical spaces.
Beautiful. Oh, this is wonderful. I think we could talk for a lot longer. But I do kind of want to wrap it up. I just have another couple of things I want to cover, because from your website, I saw you mentioned embracing feelings and meditation through feeling. And so the feeling part is the body, right? Like our feelings
Mm-hmm.
are in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of our meditation that we do, where we're avoiding feelings,
Mm-hmm.
or all of the activities we do avoiding feelings, is we're really missing the mark. But what you're doing is helping people, because when you're in your body, you're feeling your feelings, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So dance is an activity of the body. So feelings are going to come up. I mean, this is something that I think, again, we want to control, but this is like, we have to completely, it's wild, right? Like you have to just allow all of the feelings through the movement of your body to arise. Am I right about that?
That's a really important question, Reverend Carol. So there is the ritual aspect of the practice. That's why I really give a lot of importance to the archetypal and the ritual,
Mm-hmm.
which are really interconnected. Because there's a difference between a psychological uh, practice and a ritual practice, a philosophical inquiry. And I really like to make that distinction: a philosophical spiritual inquiry or a ritual inquiry, which for me is the same thing when you go into the body. And the psychological space, um, because the feeling here we're talking about is really at the sensation level. So it's almost like one level down from the psychological feelings that we have storied as
Right.
anger. And in fact, this is very much there in the architecture of what is called the rasa aspect of this dance, the dance practice that I do. The rasa is very central to it, and rasa is that experience of expansiveness. You can call it the divine experience, that experience of the direct experience of the divine consciousness, however you call it, reality, nature. It's called rasa. And the very architecture of rasa, I mean, I use architecture because I have to use it, but it isn't so set. But the constellation of rasa, perhaps that's a better word, um, it, it, it is that level down from how we story the feelings as good and bad, as instrumental. And I'm saying there's a really important role for psychology and feelings. And as I just shared, I've gone to counseling, I've used therapy in my life, and it's really important because when we are really distressed at the psychological level, that's not the time for a spiritual inquiry or a philosophical inquiry of this kind. That is the time to go and see a good therapist, because
Okay. It's a good
those important
distinction.
modalities, it's really important to distinguish that,
Yeah.
because we have to come into this practice without an instrumentality. Because if we come here to solve something, we are still in that instrumentality. We are still very limited. We are only able to inquire when we are strong enough to do that. And it doesn't mean that you have to be perfect and strong, but we just have to be prepared that this is not about solving my immediate situation, but this is about, I am interested to inquire into the nature of sensation. I'm interested to inquire into the nature of the divine, into my unconditional freedom. What does that mean? What is this inquiry? I want to be unconditionally free. So that's where this spiritual inquiry comes into being. And so I think it's important that this is not self-expression. And a ritual is not about any ritual isn't about self-expression. It is about, that constellation, exploring a certain dimension of our intelligence or consciousness that is divine, that we call divine. Like I said, it can be anything, reality, nature, that expansive part of ourselves, which is there. We are infinite beings. We are eternal. We are infinite, but that's not about living forever, but that is available to us as an experience in the moment.
Wow. Okay, great. That's wonderful. I love just thinking that this is about being unconditionally free. You said that, say unconditionally free. I mean, who out there who's listening is interested in being unconditionally free? That's pretty amazing. I want to give you the last words if you have anything that I didn't cover that you want to talk about. Just want to give you the last words.
The only thing I'd say, Reverend Carol, I feel like we've had thousands and thousands of years of spiritual traditions that have asked us to control ourselves, to to go out of the body, to transcend the body, to shut ourselves down from our senses. And I feel that hasn't really got us to a great place. Look
It's
at where
gotten us
we are
where we
now.
are.
Yes. Yes. And so I'm saying let's give some other things a chance.
Right.
And these are also ancient traditions. Let's give a chance for ourselves to actually accept the gift of the beauty that we have been given through our senses, through the body, through this beautiful body that is there, that is the site of our life, that is there throughout our life. I get really emotional when I speak about this, because here is our body accompanying us throughout our lives, that is intelligent, that can connect us to the gift of this earth, this life that we've got, rather than trying to live remotely from this gift. Let's return to this gift, and
Yeah.
let's just enjoy the beauty that is available to us through our body and through this beautiful earth that we live in. And that happens through something else that's beautiful, and that is dance. Dance is the dynamics of beauty. And it's the dynamics of beauty that has nothing to do with our mind. It's it is the most primeval way that we connect to the movement of the wind, the trees, the bird song, and dance. It's all in the same realm.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Padma, for being with us. And I want to make sure that we get a link to your website, but also you mentioned your Facebook page and whatever else would get people who are interested in unconditional freedom through the body uh, connected with you. I'll make sure I have that on our podcast page, web page for this episode. I'm so grateful that spirit led us to be together today. When you approached me, I'm like, oh, this is going to be so interesting. I'm just the luckiest person in the world being able to talk to such interesting people. And I think that what you have to offer is really it's a key or a gateway, I think, for I don't want to say solving problems. I actually kind of want to say I'm kind of returning to our original nature, our original being connected with all of life. And I think within us we have that yearning. We have that yearning. We don't really know what to do with it. And I don't think many people think, "Oh, I've got an idea. I think I need to be in my body and I think I need to engage in dance." And you've brought that to our attention today, and it's just so very, very important. So thank you for your generous sharing today.
Thank you, Reverend Carol. It's been such an honor. And you just used the most beautiful word, which is such a central word in this practice, the yearning. In fact, the goddess is the yearning. And when we yearn, we meet her in that yearning. So it's never about achieving the goddess. But when we just turn towards our yearning, that is her, that is our divinity. And so nature is yearning for us. We yearn for nature, and it's such a beautiful word. And when you use that, I just thought yes.
Yes.
And I'm so honored to be here. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you. And I just think that people like you, you're so important. Your work is so important to give your audiences and to give people a glimpse into ways in which we can actually return to a much more fullness of life than we are told is possible.
Yes, yes, and I want to be a voice of hope, so that people have hope um, and an awakening and an expectancy of all good and um, just elevating ourselves to our divine self, and also kind of going in. Yeah, I said elevating. That's kind of like going up into the air. Let's go into our bodies and experience our divine self. So thank you for this fabulous time together, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing dance explode on our planet. I can envision it. I see it now. So thank you everybody for listening. And I now close the spiritual forum.